The torch. Dr. Ilara Niven told herself the desert only whispered when a person was tired, but tonight the sand around the excavation pit shaped its hiss into something dangerously close to her name, as though the valley had waited centuries, not for any explorer, but for her. The rest of the team had already driven off, their jeep shrinking into faint red sparks across the dunes, leaving her alone with the half-unearthed doorway jutting from the earth like a forgotten ribcage. Her headlamp swept across the lintel. Even through dust, the ancient symbols seemed to watch her with a long-starved patience. She brushed the stone clean. Letters and spirals carved in a dead tongue slowly awakened under her light, whispering themselves into meaning. When the final flame descends, the first breath rises. The phrasing felt wrong, as though it had been built by a mind that did not care about warning the living, only about binding them. Her radio crackled once in her belt, then died. The wind faded. The valley's silence folded tightly around her, as if the world were leaning close to listen. Ilara lifted the brass torch from her pack. She'd bought it from an old man in Luxor who insisted with trembling certainty that fire was the only language ancient kings still obeyed. At the time, she'd thought him dramatic. Now the memory felt like an omen delivered too late. She filled the torch, struck her lighter, and flame bloomed, slow, thick, and honey gold, like something waking reluctantly from centuries of sleep. The carved symbols didn't shine in its light. They darkened, absorbing instead of reflecting, drinking deeply. Again, the words pulsed in her mind. When the final flame descends, the first breath rises. She pressed her shoulder to the stone door. It opened too easily, as though the earth itself had been holding it poised all this time, waiting for her single push. Cold air spilled out, dry, metallic, smelling faintly of ancient metal and untouched time. The flame bent toward the darkness, a bright, reaching limb. She stepped inside. The corridor sloped downward, walls closing in tight, painted scenes lined the passage, priests with downcast faces, servants offering bowls, all holding torches, angled downward toward a ritual out of sight. Their faces were scratched away, their names violently erased. Yet every painted flame remained bright, stubborn as a heartbeat. Her breath drifted ahead of her like a ghost. The torch grew brighter, whiter, sharper. Each time she halted, the flame strained forward, urging her, pulling her, almost guiding her deeper into the throat of the tomb. The path opened into an antechamber. Murals bruised by time lined the walls, and every figure was kneeling toward a tall black doorway. At its threshold, a bowl-shaped hollow lay scorched into obsidian smoothness, as though a fire had been fed there for days or centuries without pause. Around the basin, text spiraled inward like a snare tightening around prey. She who bears the final light shall unseal the king's lungs. He who stood breathless shall breathe what she leaves behind. Alara's skin tightened. This was no resurrection ritual. It was a replacement. Every researcher before her had used electric lights, cold light, lifeless light. She alone had carried a living flame into this place, a flame that breathed, a flame that descended, a flame that could be taken. Fear rose hot in her throat, but curiosity, bright and reckless, overpowered it. She stepped into the scorched basin. Cold surged upward, numbing bone. The torch strained perfectly horizontal, pointing into the black doorway like a compass driven mad with purpose. She stepped through. The chamber was a cathedral hollowed from darkness. Her flame reached outward and vanished into a void that swallowed light whole. The mirrored floor reflected her and her fire, making it seem she walked above a drowned version of herself. At the center of the chamber stood a mummy, the unmistakable shape of a man, a king. He towered over her, wrapped in linen, the shade of dried bone. His bindings clung to powerful shoulders, long limbs, the curve of a sternum that had belonged to a warrior or ruler in life. The wrappings over his face were pulled tight, pressing the hollow shapes of sunken eyes and a once strong jaw into the cloth. This was no priest, no servant. This had been someone great and someone dangerous. The flame in her hand surged toward him like a predator recognizing another. Heat seared her palm, but she could not release the torch. It clung to her hand like a brand. Her breath left her in a trembling cloud. Instead of fading, it drifted toward the king, hesitated, and then seeped into the wrappings around his chest. Her lungs tightened. She inhaled sharply. The air felt thin, as though someone else were inhaling it with her. Her exhale fluttered out weakly and again floated into the mummy's chest. The king's ribs moved, a shallow, stretching inhale, ancient, wrong, yet unmistakably male in its power. The chest that had once commanded armies stirred beneath its bindings. When the final flame descends, the first breath rises, not prophecy, command, exchange. Alara tried to back away. Her legs refused. The torch extended from her hand like a spear of molten gold. The king expanded his chest further. The bandages rose. The sound that came from him was a dry crackle, like old parchment remembering how to breathe. Her breath stuttered, catching painfully in her throat. She gasped. Nothing came. The chamber swallowed her panic. The flame touched the king's sternum. Light flowed into him. Her torch extinguished in an instant, but the room brightened, lit from within him. A dull, smoldering glow pulsed in his ribs like the embers of a furnace waking after centuries. Her lungs collapsed inward. The last of her breath tore free, dragged across her lips by invisible fingers. The king inhaled, deep, powerful, terrible. A fissure split across the wrappings covering his mouth. Beneath them, a dark, wet cavern of teeth grinned, teeth that belonged to a man, not a monster. A man returning. Something spoke. Not aloud, but from the hollow where her breath had lived moments before. At last, my queen of fire. The chamber glowed brighter, fed by the stolen flame within his chest. Sand shifted far above as the desert wind erased all trace of her footsteps. Below, in the stone lungs of the tomb, the king drew another breath, her breath, and smiled with a man's terrible longing for life regained.